to Storytime with Someone Else's Mom. With me, Someone Else's Mom. Today we're diving into Chapter 2 of Edward Eger's classic, Magic by the Lake, the second book in his wonderful Half Magic series. Let's dive right into Chapter 2, which is a little bit on the long side, so we'll dive right into the magic. Remember, talking turtle. Now you've done it. Here we go. "What did you say?" said Martha. "You heard me," said the turtle. "I didn't know you could talk," said Catherine. "Well, now you know," said the turtle, and it started to withdraw into its shell again. "Wait, please, don't go," were the words of Catherine and Martha and Jane. Mark wasted no time in speech. He laid hold of the turtle's head and hung on, deaf to all fear of snappings. The turtle's neck stretched alarmingly, but it could not get free. "I'm sorry if this is uncomfortable," Mark told it politely but firmly, "but you can't just say a thing like that and disappear. You've got to tell us more." "Oh, very well," said the turtle crossly. "Unloose me," it added, and Mark let go its head. Really, the manners of some people. "You're magic," said Martha. "Naturally," said the turtle. "When a race lives as long as mine does, it stands to reason it would pick up a few rudiments. Of course," it added proudly, "I happen to be a particularly intelligent specimen, even for a turtle." "Can all turtles talk?" asked Catherine. "Oh, that," said the turtle. "We picked that up in the first 50 years. "Why don't you do it oftener then?" said Jane. "We couldn't be bothered," snapped the turtle, looking at her with no great liking. Mark thought it wise to intervene. "About what we were just saying," he said. "Did you mean you've granted our wish?" "Don't go saying I did it," said the turtle. "Don't come complaining to me. People who go around making wishes without looking to see what magic beings are listening can just take the consequences." "Oh, we're not complaining," said Catherine quickly. "We think it's awfully nice of you. We're grateful. You've been very obliging. Thank you very much," said the turtle. "Magic's just about all we needed to make things just about perfect," said Jane. "Ha," said the turtle. "That's what you think, and a lot you know about it. But of course, you couldn't be sensible, could you, and order magic by the pound, for instance, or by the day, or by threes, the good old-fashioned way, or even by halves, the way you did before." "But how do you even know about that?" said Martha. "I know everything," said the turtle, "if it's worth knowing." "But no, not you. You had to be greedy and order magic by the lake. And of course now you've got a whole lake full of it. And for how you're going to manage it, I for one wash my hands of the whole question." You mean the whole lake's magic?" said Mark. "All of it?" "It is now," said the turtle. Jane's eyes turned toward the lake. She gasped. "Look," she said. The others looked. "What did I tell you?" said the turtle. It took one look at the lake, shuddered, and withdrew into its shell. The four children stared transfixed. Every bit of the lake's surface seemed to be suddenly alive, and each bit of it was alive in a different way. It was like trying to keep track of a dozen three-ring circuses, only more so. Water babies gamboled in the shallows. A sea serpent rose from the depths. Some rather insipid-looking fairies flew over. A witch hobbled on a far bank. A rat and a mole and a toad paddled along near the willowy shore, simply messing about in a boat. A family of dolls explored a floating island. On the other side of the same island, a solitary man stared at a footprint in the sand. A hand appeared in the middle of the lake holding a sword. Britannia ruled the waves. Davy Jones came out of his locker. Neptune himself appeared with naiads and nereids too numerous to mention. The two younger children shut their eyes. "Make it stop," said Martha. "Now I know what too much of a good thing means," said Catherine. "I never thought there could be before." "I wouldn't enjoy it," said Jane, surveying the lake critically. "Not in front of all those people. We couldn't enter in." "Maybe it could be sort of simplified," said Mark. "Moderation is pleasant to the wise," and he turned an appeal to the turtle. But the turtle had seized this opportunity to escape and was making for the water as fast as it could, which was fortunately not very fast. The four children gave chase and brought it to bay. It went into its shell again. Mark rapped on the shell politely. The turtle peered cautiously from within. We've got to talk this over, said Mark. You've got to do something. I did, said the turtle from inside the shell. And now look, there's no satisfying some people. And you needn't go asking me to take it back because it's too late. Magic has rules, you know, same as anything else. Yes, we know, said Mark, but you'd never think so to look at it now. It's all every which way. They all looked at the lake again. Some jumblies had appeared going to the sea in a sieve. A walrus and a carpenter danced with some oysters on a nearby shore. In the distance, Columbus was discovering America. It's too big, said Catherine. I think it needs alterations. Couldn't you let us have a few more wishes, said Jane, so we can sort of tame it and know where we stand? We'll be awfully grateful, said Catherine. We'll build you a lovely tank and give you the best care money can buy. No, thank you, said the turtle. I was perfectly happy in my own inlet until you came along. I had a lovely life there. I want to go home. Not till you let us make more wishes, said Jane, putting her foot on the turtle firmly. Oh, very well, said the turtle. If I must, I must. Only I have to make them. I'm the magic one around here, and only 3, mind. That's the magic number. Naturally, said Jane. Proceed, said the turtle. Jane removed her foot. First of all, said Mark, who had been thinking, let's have only one magic adventure at a time, and not every day, just every so often. Then we'll have time to recover in between. Is that all one wish? Said the turtle. I'll try, but it will take a lot out of me. The other 2 had better be easy. No grown-ups noticing, said Catherine, so Mother won't abandon all hope of sanity the way she did last time. And nothing scary, said Martha. Granted, said the turtle, and that is absolutely all. The other 3 turned on Martha. What did you have to go and ask that for? Said Jane. Now it'll all be tame and namby-pamby and watered down, like those awful children's editions of books Aunt Grace always gives us. Yeah, that's 3 Musketeers with Lady de Winter left right out, said Mark. Excavated versions, I think they're called, said Catherine. You can see why. The turtle gave them a look. Don't be so sure, it said. After all, I made the wish, so there won't be anything in it that would scare me. But then it added, and Catherine swore afterwards that it winked at them. Nothing does. And it started for the lake, leaving the 4 children with that to think over. Mark ran after it. Wait, he said, how will we know when it's time? You won't, said the turtle, turning at the water's edge. When you feel like magic, touch the lake and wish, and if the time is right, you'll get it. Or not, as the case may be, and it plopped into the water. Will we see you again? Jane called. Not if I see you first, were the parting words of the turtle. Try not to call unless it's absolutely necessary. And it swam away. And where it touched the water, the magic started disappearing, and the disappearing spread outwards to both sides like the wake of a ship, until at the last ripple of turtle vanished in the distance, the lake lay calm and untroubled and uninhabited, except in a normal fishy way, under the setting sun, just as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. So that's that, said Jane, and we're left to cope with it. When will it start, do you suppose? Said Catherine. Tonight? Faltered Martha. We just touched the lake a while back, and I was probably wishing all sorts of things. I shouldn't think so, said Mark. I shouldn't think till tomorrow when it's fresh. It's getting pretty late now. Good, said Martha. I'd rather it didn't start at night. Joy cometh in the morning, said Catherine. Dinner, called their mother. Going to bed that night was interesting, for they had never slept on their own sleeping porch before, to say nothing of crickets and water softly lapping, and the sound that night in the country makes, which really isn't a sound at all, but the echo of a silence. The end of a perfect day, said Mark, from his side of the porch. Peace, perfect peace, said Jane from hers. On the long front part, by the summer house in the silver birches, Martha got out of her bed and into Catherine's. What's the matter? Can't you sleep? Said Catherine. I keep thinking, said Martha. I keep thinking about all that magic in the lake, and that part where they'd never found bottom, and that big snake thing that came up out of it. Trust ye unto the magic's power, called Jane, who had overheard. It's never let us down before. In youth it sheltered us, said Catherine. Chances are it will protect us now. At that moment, a blood-curdling laugh rent the air. Well, what was that? Said Jane. A loon, said Mark, who was a Boy Scout. What's a loon? Whispered Martha, trembling. A bird, Catherine told her. It couldn't be, said Martha. It's that big snake thing. Hush, said Catherine. Listen to the crickets. I don't like them, said Martha. They could be ghost twittering. They aren't, said Catherine. Get back in your own bed. Hold my hand then, said Martha. Oh, all right, said Catherine. And Martha got back into her own bed, and Catherine reached out an arm from hers, and the sisters joined hands in the space between. And which limp hand fell first from the lifeless clasp of the other and sank into utter drowsiness will never be known. The next thing that was known was the sun shining in their eyes and turning the lake all blue and gold. Breakfast followed as day the night, and then Mr. Smith had to leave for the city in time to open the bookshop for the afternoon, which is what he had decided to do every day this summer except weekends, when he would be gloriously free like the others. But first he drove the 4 children over the rolling pasture to a farm on the red clay road, and they saw milk being milked and carried the nourishing cans of it back to the car, and today Mr. Smith delivered it and them to the cottage. But after this, getting the milk would be the 4 children's morning task, on foot. And then Mr. Smith departed, and the children's mother suggested a morning dip. Farms have charms to soothe the most savage breast, and swimming is just about the highest good. So it was some time before thoughts of magic entered the children's heads. When they touched the lake for the first time, all they wished was that swimming would be as wonderful today as it was yesterday. And it was. It wasn't until they lay spent on the sand that they began wondering about the magic, and when it would begin, and what would be its alluring form when it did. Do you suppose we get to choose it all, or will it take us by surprise? Said Jane. Shush, said Catherine, nodding in the direction of their mother, who was sitting all too nearby. But their mother didn't look up from the book she was reading and didn't appear to have heard a word, so that part of the magic seemed to be working already. What would everybody choose if we could? Said Jane. Pirates, said Mark at once, touching the edge of the lake that rippled shallowly at his feet. Mermaids, said Catherine, touching her bit of the lake edge at the same moment. Neither one, said Martha quickly, but nobody heard her because everyone was talking at once. That's done it, Mark said. Now I suppose we'll get a sort of blend. What would be the blend of a mermaid and a pirate? Said Jane. A mer-pirate, said Catherine, long golden hair and black whiskers. But that wasn't what the 4 children saw a few minutes later. What they saw, floating toward the beach, was a perfectly ordinary mermaid, such as you might meet any day in any perfectly ordinary sea. She was combing her long golden hair, and the scales of her supple tail glittered through the foam behind her. She saw the 4 children and beckoned with her golden comb. Come, dear children, let us away, down and away below, were her thrilling words. Martha chose this moment to be difficult, as only she knew how. I won't go, she said. I know all about what she does. Mother read me a story. She lures poor sailors and they drown. Something about a laurel eye. Jane propelled her sister forward. You can't back out now, she said. Now we're in the thick of it. It would be changing courses in the middle of the stream, said Catherine. Then that's what I'll do, said Martha. But Jane took hold of one of her arms, and Mark took hold of the other, and Catherine pushed from behind, and the mermaid seemed to take hold of all of them, though she only had 2 hands, and they shot forward into the lake. Mother! cried Martha to the vanishing shore. I see you, her mother nodded smilingly. Keep it up, you're swimming fine. Martha's answering wail was cut short as the waters closed over her head. At first she kept her eyes tight shut, but at last fear gave way to curiosity, and she opened them cautiously. To her surprise, she could see perfectly well underwater, which had never been true before, but she couldn't see much because they were going too fast. She got an impression of sandy bottom far below. Things moved squidgily in it, and Martha shut her eyes again firmly. Catherine was holding her breath. After a while, she began to wonder if this was absolutely necessary. At last, when utter bursting seemed likely, she decided to try. "Can we breathe, do you suppose?" she said, "or will we drown?" "Glug, glug," were the words of Mark, or at least that's what they sounded like. Catherine decided that breathing was possible, but conversation wasn't. Then, just as the rushing wateriness was beginning to pall on even the most venturesome heart, Jane's, there was a change in the atmosphere. It grew lighter and brighter, and next thing, the four children shot out of it entirely into open air. "Land ahoy!" said Mark. "Where are we?" said Martha, relieved to find herself anywhere. Jane's eyes were shining. "Lagoons," she said, pointing. "Desert islands, coral reefs, coves." The others looked where she pointed. There was only one island and one coral reef and one lagoon, or cove, but that was exciting enough. They were floating rapidly past the reef and into the lagoon and toward the island. The mermaid, who seemed to be a mermaid of few words, was towing them. Then they touched land, and barnacles scraped Catherine's knee. "I didn't know the lake had all this in it," she said. "Which way is home?" "Don't be silly," said Mark. "We left that old lake behind ages ago. We're halfway around the world by now. Feel the climate. It's tropical." Jane was already scrambling up the rocks. Mark hoisted Martha up to her, and he and Catherine followed. The mermaid draped herself fishily against the base of the rock. "So far, so good," she said. "Now sing." "Sing what?" said Catherine. "What for?" asked Mark. "To lure a ship into shore, of course, stupid," said the mermaid. "What did I tell you?" said Martha. But now the mermaid was raising her voice in song, and Jane and Catherine, feeling that in a magic adventure it is best to do whatever seems to be expected of you, joined in. After a bit, Martha added her piping tones to theirs. Who knows what song the sirens sang? I do not, and neither did Sir Thomas Browne, who once wrote some very well-known lines on the subject. Few will ever know what song Jane and Catherine and Martha sang upon that coral coast either. But they listened to the mermaid's tune and did their best to follow it, and as to what words they sang, they let inspiration take its course. Come unto these yellow sands, they sang. Come all ye young fellows who follow the sea. Come, come, I love you only, my heart is true. Catherine even tried to put in the alto, the way her Aunt Grace always did in church. As for Jane, she got carried away completely, and soon was nodding and becking and smiling wreathed smiles and waving her freckled arms with alluring grace and combing her longish ungolden hair with the mermaid's extra comb which she borrowed for the purpose. Mark, who had been holding his ears, turned away and made a gagging sound. But the song seemed to do the trick, for a sail appeared on the horizon and turned into a ship that veered from its course and came rapidly toward them. And as it came nearer, a delighted gasp was heard from the four children, and they would have shivered happily in their shoes, except they didn't have any on, being still dressed for swimming. For the ship was dark and looming, and its sails were black and sinister. A skull and crossbones was its suitable flag, and among the toiling figures on the deck walked a tall man in high boots and the kind of hat that made it all too plain what his dreadful trade was. And from the way he strutted up and down, you could tell even at a distance that he thought it was a glorious thing to be a pirate king. Shiver my timbers, said Jane. Shush, said Mark. The ship was so near now that the four children could hear the pirate's voice plainly as he gave orders to drop anchor and man the longboat. A few seconds later, the longboat began to descend. This is where I leave you, said the mermaid in a businesslike way, and without a backward glance, she turned tail and sank beneath the waves. Wait, cried Catherine, for there was much she wanted to ask the mermaid about life in undersea circles. But the mermaid was gone, and the four children were left a prey to feelings of doubt and conspicuousness as the pirate chief and his men drew ever nearer to shore in the longboat. Let's hide, said Martha suddenly, and all agreed that this suggestion was excellent. The island afforded little shelter except palm trees, but the four children were soon stationed behind four of these, all too aware of the fact that their plumper parts were still sticking out plainly to either side of the meager trunks. The bow of the longboat ground against sand, and the pirate chief leapt nimbly ashore for all his high, heavy boots. The children could see that he was a handsome devil with beautifully curling black whiskers. "Up with the treasure and after me," he said to his men. "Bring spades, picks, and shovels." Some of the men heaved a great chest up out of the boat. Others followed with the tools of digging. The black-whiskered one strode to a sandy spot just in front of the 4 palm trees. He pointed with his fine, white, gentlemanly hand that had rings on all the fingers, diamonds and emeralds. "Dig!" he said. And the men dug long and deep in the sand, while their chief paced up and down, muttering to himself and biting his nails. He did not seem to see the 4 children, though they were sure that any minute he would. "This treasure," he muttered, "will rest safely here till I'm ready to retire and take my place in the world as a gentleman, or my name's not Chauncey Cutlass." One of the digging men had overheard and whispered to his fellows. They put down their spades. The first man stepped forward with the others behind. "What about our part in it?" he said. "We pirated it, same as you." Chauncey Cutlass looked at him and smiled a dangerous smile. "I have heard," he said, "of a captain who buried a man alive with his treasure to guard it. Are you so fond of this chest, Simon Sparhatch, that you would care to stay with it? Or are any of you other gallows fodder anxious to take his place?" And he drew a pistol from his belt. Simon Sparhatch retreated, a scowl on his ugly face. The men growled in their throats, but made no reply. "Well, all right then," said Chauncey Cutlass. "Dig!" The men dug again. Catherine, like many a more classic heroine before her, chose this moment to sneeze. The pirates jumped, and so did the 4 children. "Hark!" said Chauncey Cutlass. Chauncey Cutlass. "What was that?" There was a pause. Then Mark proved what a hero he could be if necessary. He stepped out from behind his palm tree. "It was me," he started to say, but he suppressed the words in time. For Chauncey Cutlass and his men were looking straight at him, and yet they seemed to be looking straight through him at the horizon beyond. "'Twas nothing," said Cutlass after a moment. "Mayhap a seagull flying over." "Black-tailed godwit, I'd say," said a learned pirate, "or a booby." "Or a seal barking," said another. "Can't they see us?" hissed Jane from behind her tree. "I guess not," Mark hissed back. "Kathy wished grown-ups wouldn't notice, and I guess they're grown-ups, same as any." "But they're magic," Catherine joined in the whispering. "They ought to notice everything. I mean, you'd think." "I guess they kind of notice, but not much," whispered Mark. "How the wind whispers in the trees," said Chauncey Cutlass, just to prove it. "This is dandy," said Jane. "Now we can plague them and prey on them and bamboozle them to our heart's content, and they'll never know who. What could be sweeter?" "What do we do?" said Catherine. "Let's not do anything," said Martha. "Hurry up with that digging," said Chauncey Cutlass to his men, "and back to the ship. I like not this shore. The very trees seem to be staring at me, and the air seems full of voices. Spirits, I suppose. Still, all the better to guard the treasure with. Now, in with the box." The digging men stopped digging and heaved the treasure chest down and into the hole. Then they started to shovel the earth on top of it. "Heel it down firmly," said Chauncey Cutlass, and they did, with a flat stone atop to mark the spot. Then the elegant pirate ordered one of his men to spread a cloak on the ground so he wouldn't soil his own velvet knees, and he knelt down and carved his initials on the stone with a diamond from one of his rings. The 4 children, meanwhile, had repaired to the longboat, and the others were soothing the faltering Martha, who wanted to steal the boat now while all the backs were turned and row away with it. And she wasn't interested in staying to play tricks on the pirates either. "It wouldn't be right," she said. "What did they ever do to us?" "Honestly," said Jane, "imagine bringing up a thing like that at a time like this, pointing morals when you're really just scared. They're pirates. They ought to be preyed on. It's the golden rule." "Yes, I suppose there is that," said Martha. "Don't worry," said Mark. "We've had lots fearfuler adventures than this and lived to tell the tale." "That's true," said Martha. She wrestled with her fears for a minute and then set her jaw grimly. "All right," she said. "It's war to the teeth." "Good," said Jane. And now Chauncey Cutlass had finished his carving and strode to the shore, and his men clambered after him. The 4 children barely had time to jump into the longboat before it was pushed off. Inside the boat, it was rather crowded, what with 4 extra passengers. "Stop shoving," said Captain Cutlass to Simon Sparhatch. "I ain't," said Sparhatch. "This is lovely," said Catherine, who was squashed between them. "It's like being invisible, only better." And she nudged the captain in the ribs with her elbow. "Don't be so familiar," said the captain, glaring at Sparhatch haughtily. "I bain't," said Sparhatch. "Careful," said Mark to Catherine. "Don't do anything rash till we get on the ship. Once aboard the lugger, the world is ours." "Maybe we can scuttle it with all hands," said Martha, her eyes glowing. That was always the way with Martha. Once she stopped being a baby, she could be the terror of the block and the fiercest of any of them. Mark only hoped she wouldn't go too far now that she was roused. They drew nearer to the ship, and the children could read its chilling name, the Scourge of Cuba. "Yo-ho," said Jane, "for the Spanish Main." "Pieces of 8, muttered Martha. The pirates climbed the rope ladder to the deck, but the 4 children lolled luxuriously in the longboat and waited for the pirates to hoist them aboard. "Summat be ailing with this here boat," said one of the pirates who was doing the hoisting. "It be heavy as an old scow." "'Tis bewitched," said Simon Sparhatch, who was helping him. "'Tis them island spirits still following us. Sure 'tis a cursed voyage. There be a Jonah aboard, and scrape my barnacles if it be not the captain himself, a great strutting popinjay." "Stow it, Sparhatch," said the other pirate. "That be mutinous talk." "Then let it be," said Sparhatch, making the boat fast. This gave Mark an idea. Maybe if they could stir the men up enough, then maybe they would have a mutiny as well as a pirate ship, and who could ask for anything more? As they scrambled out of the longboat onto the deck, he called the others around him in a whispering huddle. They made a few quick plans and then separated, Mark hurrying forward to the captain's cabin, while the 3 others ran to the mainmast. Coming from inland and being mere girls besides, they knew little of nautical matters, but Catherine untied all the knots she could see, and Jane found a jackknife and cut a few ropes here and there, and the sails were soon sagging and flopping and tangling with each other like wet sheets that you try to hang out on the line on a windy wash day. "Sink me," said one of the pirates, looking up. "What devil's wind is this fouling our rigging while the sea be calm as glass and nary a breeze stirring?" "Sure the ship be haunted," cried another. Catherine located the line that controlled the skull and crossbones flag and started to let it down, and a moan went up from the deck. "Wara, wara," cried the pirates. "We be doomed. See the flag standing at half-mast for the whole crew of us." As for Martha, she knew no bounds. "Pinch them fairies, black and blue," she cried, and running among the pirates, she suited the action to the words. The pirates began howling with fear and swatting at the air, and 1 or 2 even climbed the rail, ready to plunge overboard and escape the ghostly pinches. "Belay!" cried Simon Sparhatch, taking command of the panicking men. "The doom need be for only one of us, and who but that great fop of a captain who landed us on that cursed island and catched us with the swarm of spirits in the first place. Over the side with him and rid us of these pinching pests." And he snatched up a belaying pin and started for the captain's cabin. All the pirates ran along with him with cries of "Mutiny!" and "Keel haul him!" and "Down among the dead men!" And Jane and Catherine and Martha ran with the others. Meanwhile, Mark had stealthily entered the captain's cabin and looked around. The captain was standing before a mirror, curling his black whiskers with an iron and admiring his reflection. Mark stole up behind him, removed the brace of pistols from his belt, gave them a good dousing with the captain's own eau de cologne, and replaced them. The captain didn't seem to notice exactly, but an uneasy expression crossed his countenance. "Am I alone?" he said to the air. "I thought I was alone." Mark closed the door behind him. "Now we can have a really good talk," he said. The captain didn't seem to hear the words exactly, but he saw the door closing, and his proud face blanched. "What ghost are you?" he said. "Are you horrible Herbert that I fed to the sharks in Biscay Bay? Or Newgate Ned that I marooned and left to die on Rumtuddy Reef?" "Beware," said Mark in a hollow voice, and whether or not the word was heard, the sense of it got across. Chauncey Cutlass trembled. "Your ship is adrift, and your men have mutinied," said Mark. "You are as good as shark bait yourself already." And the shouts of the mutinying crew were heard outside the door to prove it. Chauncey Cutlass showed that, whatever else he was, he had courage. He flung the door open and fired point blank at Simon Sparhat, who was in the lead. But a damp and perfumey puff of smoke was all that issued from the pistol. "Ha!" said Sparhat, sniffing the air. "His powder'd be like himself, a great fizzle, a fitting ammunition for a mincing jackanapes. Up with him to the deck and toss the dainty dancing master over the rail, then away to Hispaniola to make our fortune." The captain was trundled up the companionway, and villain though he was, the four children could not help feeling sorry for him, a victim of that merciless crew of cutthroats. But they reckoned without the craft and courage of Chauncey Cutlass. "Avast!" he cried as the sailors lifted him to the rail. "If you drop me, I swear by the great horn spoon I'll come back and haunt you worse than these others. If you drop me, a plague on you for a bunch of mollycoddles, letting some old ghost ruin our whole cruise. If you do as I say, we'll be free of the pesky things sooner than you can box the compass. If we can feel their pinches, surely we can feel to catch them, or I'm a swab and a landlubber." The crew fell back and hesitated before him. "Quick," he went on, jumping lightly down from the rail. "Batten down all the hatches so none may escape from the deck. Then form two parties, and all in each party join hands. Stretch out the width of the deck. Start at the stern and let one party stalk them starboard and the other to port. When the two parties meet, you should have them trapped between you." Cowed by his fierce glance, the men obeyed, though Simon Sparhat sulked and muttered. And a horrible sort of game followed, as the pirates stalked the deck, feeling before them and hunting down the spirit-like children, who fled vainly from one line only to encounter the other. "Here's one!" cried a pirate, laying hold of Jane. "A fierce female ghost, to judge by the hair and teeth." "And here be another," said a second pirate, poking at Martha experimentally. "A small fat one." "What, you?" said Martha, outraged. Catherine was caught after that, and Mark last of all. "Beware!" Mark cried balefully as before, but this time Chauncey Cutlass was beyond frightening. "I don't care whose ghost you are," he said. "I'll teach you to come haunting me. Fetch a plank and let them walk it. Then we'll see whether ghosts can swim." A plank was fetched, and the four children pushed onto it by the feel and grab method. Though invisible to the pirates, they were all too evident to each other, and none took comfort from the pale cheeks of the others. "Will we drown, do you suppose?" said Jane. "We did it before." "Then we had a personally conducted mermaid," Catherine reminded her. "Now, if ever," said Mark, "is the time to call the turtle. It said not unless it was absolutely necessary, and it is." "Here, Turtle," said Martha. "That's no way," said Mark. It's not just some old pet. You want to be respectful and flatter it." "Oh, Turtle," he began. But at that moment, Chauncey Cutlass signaled to the men to tilt the plank, and his words ended in wetness. There was a moment of doubt and struggling and lashing out and courage sinking to its lowest ebb. Then a familiar voice sounded in Mark's ear. "Well," it said, "pirates were what you asked for. I hope you're satisfied." Mark opened his eyes. A familiar figure was swimming beside him, but there seemed to be three more figures just like it, only smaller, swimming there too. And suddenly Mark realized that he felt very peculiar and stiff in the middle and small in the arms and legs. "What happened?" he said. "Didn't you ever hear of turning turtle?" said the turtle. It was the only thing I could think of at the time. Mark looked down at himself. It was true. Plated shell encased him on top and below, and little fat arms and legs protruded from the corners and were paddling him along through the water. "Now," said the turtle, "you can see how the other half lives." "Thanks," said Mark. They went on swimming, which seemed like forever, for turtles are not the quickest of creatures, but at last they came into shallow water and up over the familiar sand and pebbles and snail shells of their own beach. "There," said the turtle, and it swam away, leaving the other four turtles on the shore, confidently waiting to change back to their real selves. But they didn't. Not a thing happened, except that their mother looked up from her book and said, "Well, did you have a good swim? Come on inside, it's time for lunch." And she went into the cottage, and the four turtles looked at each other and shrugged, which is hard to do if you're a turtle, and plodded after her. Carrie the cat took one look at them, hissed, spat, and leapt on the mantel. but their mother went on not noticing a thing except to scold them for tracking water into the house and tell them to go back outside and dry themselves. Handing a Turkish towel is even harder for a turtle than shrugging, and sitting at the table to eat lunch was harder yet, particularly as it was turtle soup. "I feel like a cannibal," said Catherine. "Cheer up, maybe it's just mock," said Mark. "What do turtles eat usually?" said Martha. "Fish eggs, don't they?" said Jane. "Do we have any caviar?" "Certainly not," said their mother. "What in the world are you talking about?" After lunch, she took them for a walk to Cold Springs to buy a few necessities of life, and the four turtles caused quite a stir among the lakeside children as they stood in the grocery store cashier's line carrying their parcels. But of course, none of the grown-ups noticed anything unusual, and scolded all their children roundly when they got home for telling such horrid, pointless fibs. Several were sent to bed without any supper. As for Jane and Mark and Catherine and Martha's mother, she didn't seem to see the other children crying out and pointing, but got quite cross at her own offspring for the way they were dilly-dallying and walking so slowly today. The four turtles grew wearier and wearier and more footsore as they plodded homeward, trying to keep up with her. It was with feelings of utter exhaustion that they finally flopped onto the cool grass under the hammock in the late afternoon. Martha went so far as to withdraw into her shell and announce she wasn't coming out until conditions improved. "How long will it last, do you suppose?" said Catherine. "Till sundown, I guess, if it's like all the books," said Mark, "though this isn't like any book I ever read." "The shell part's the worst," said Jane. "My middle keeps itching and I can't get at it to scratch." At that moment, the sun sank redly behind the silver birches, and a few seconds later, Catherine smiled with relief at the ordinary but welcome face of her older sister. Martha uncurled her head and arms and legs from a very peculiar and uncomfortable looking position. "After this," said Mark, "I'm going to feel lots closer to that turtle. Think what it goes through." "I shouldn't think it would put up with it," said Jane. "I should think it'd go on strike." "We must be specially kind to it," said Catherine, "when we see it again." "I wonder when we will," said Martha. "Dinner," said their mother from the doorway, and they went inside. Thank you for joining me for Chapter 2 of Magic by the Lake. Next time, we'll be reading Chapter 3, The Canoe. Until then, take care, be safe, and have fun.